All right, so if WHMCS is sort of a client management area and it's sort of a database of all of that information that's happening on there, WHM is all server related stuff. It has, you know, it's holding all the hosting accounts and all the data, but you're going to see a lot more server related stuff like how much disk space someone is using, how much bandwidth that account is getting hit with, like so in traffic. You know, what emails has the server sent as a whole for that individual user? You can get into those individual user cPanel accounts. And there's a lot of really interesting information in there. I was just talking to Alicia a little bit, and so we're going to look at ways in which I call it reading the tea leaves. Because people say, like, what's happening on my server? It kind of feels like a black box. People are signing up, but then it's like, unless they're telling me about the cool stuff they're doing, I don't really know. And so like this is a great place to start digging in and saying, what's actually happening? Who's installing what? What software is going on here? Who are my more popular websites? But it is reading the tea leaves because it's a dumb server. It doesn't have any real concept of things. I've had people ask like, well, how many pages have been created? And I'm like, what's a page in Omeka or in the whatever specific piece of software they might be using, you know? And so like different concepts, a server is just, you know, it's just doing its own thing. It doesn't have any real concept of analytics beyond very basic stuff. And so it is somewhat reading the tea leaves to say, okay, if this person's using a whole lot of disk space, they may have installed some interesting things in there, or they may have just uploaded their whole desktop to the server, you know, as a backup. They might, you know, be hosting MP3 files, or it could be legitimate stuff. So, you know, you have to kind of guess and figure out stuff in here. But let's look at some of the basic things in here. I will also take this moment just right out the gate to mention that there is things you could do in here that could harm your server. You could shut your entire server down. You could reboot it. You could do various things. There's troubleshooting tasks that you can run, but it will take your entire system offline for users. So we give you enough rope to hang yourself with. If you never want to even log in here and deal with this kind of stuff, you don't have to. But I'm going to cover the safe things that you can do in here. But just know WHM, again, is a dumb server, and it says all the access you need, go for it. You know, have fun with it. So there are things in here that you may not want to do, like shut the server down unless you're doing it for a particular reason. And you're probably already communicating with us, and you're probably asking us to do it instead. So just know that. So let's look at a couple things in here. You'll see somewhat similar to cPanel, we have a whole bunch of icons as well as this sidebar of stuff. Jim covered it a little bit earlier when he was going to list accounts, but this search feature is a godsend. Because not only is it searching directly by the names, but they've actually put in a dictionary of stuff. So even if you type in things that aren't actually related, they kind of know what you're trying to go for. So, you know, like if I type installs or install, you can see it will start to narrow down by basic things. And I can find like Installatron, which is our application package management tool in there, as well as things that you can install in there. But you'll also see other random stuff where install is not in the word, but it mentions something that's related to installing a piece of software. And so it's putting it in there. So the search tool is a great way just to even find stuff. I don't even monkey around with any of these icons in the main area just because you have to click multiple times, whereas I can just search for the exact thing that I'm needing and get there. So first, let's look at Installatron, because if you've used Account before in Domain of One's Own, you're probably pretty familiar with the process of installing WordPress or a piece of software of any kind in there. You know, it's got one of those nice one-click installers. You click the icon, you hit yes, you choose where it's going to go, and you're done. On WHM, you're sort of the god of your server, and so you get to see everybody's installs. It's still the same interface, but check out my applications tab and my backups. It's everything on the entire server. So now I can say with some level of confidence, obviously you've got your power users that might FTP files up, create a database, and set up their WordPress install the old school way, but it's unlikely. You know, for the most part, I can say with some level of confidence, people have installed 658 pieces of software on my server, and I can access all of them in here. I can search for them as well. So I might say like, okay, did Jim ever install anything? No. Groom. How about, you know, Owens? Anything on there? No, nothing like that. How about courses? because I do know that there's some stuff in there. And so I can find stuff that has courses in the URL or the title of the actual install in here. Another interesting thing to note here, because this is Installtron and it functions exactly the same, is that these WordPress installs, you can get into the dashboard of them just by hitting WP admin, that link in there. So it does function very much just like as if you're in an individual cPanel user account.
And so if you go into their dashboard, you have full admin status.
Yep. Absolutely. You're a full admin in there. You can help them out and install plugins or break everything and delete it. Yeah. Yeah. You are God, or goddess, as the case may be. You are them. Yeah. When you hit that WP admin link, you're logging in with the same login that they would be logging in as. Absolutely. So, but there's other interesting things that we can do in here as well. So we can see all applications, but what if I searched by the name of a piece of software like Omeka? So now this search is only going to show me the Omeka installs in here, which not a very popular piece of software on StateU. If I scroll down to the bottom, you'll see 1 through 7 of 7. So out of those 600 whatever installs, 7 of them are Omeka. Search WordPress, but I have a pretty good idea of what chunk of the pie they've got in there. So this gives you some more insight into like, what kind of things are people installing? And you might, I'm less interested in the 600 whatever of what everybody else is doing, but I'm kind of interested in these 7 installs and what they might be doing, just to be able to promote like what stuff is happening outside of the WordPress world and other pieces of software people might be running. They may have just been testing stuff out. That happens. You get somebody who will install one of everything and it all lays dormant and they don't do anything with it. But they might be doing some really interesting stuff as well. So this gives you insight on the server as a whole to what kind of things people are installing in there. This gear icon is the one section that only exists in the WHM area, not in a user's individual cPanel account. And that's because these are all the administrative tools for Installatron that only exist to an administrator. And so end users don't have access to any of this. I'm going to cover a couple different things that you can see in here and do. We talked about emails. Maybe you want to customize those emails that people get when they install a piece of software. Maybe you want to be able to point them to a way of getting support after they've installed something. Again, we've got just a few merge tags, the actual type of software that they were using, their login details. In this case, it's not sending the password, just the admin link and that kind of stuff. So we can pop some of those in there, but otherwise we can customize the text of the email that's going out to them when they install a copy of WordPress. You might say, hey, as a heads up, we have a lynda.com subscription. Here are some great WordPress tutorials that you have access to as a member of the community. So very cool way to customize that experience if you want to. You can customize the install complete here. There's a drop down. If there was an error, you might say if there's a backup error or an install error, hey, we noticed there's an error on your account. The backup didn't do it. Here's the error that we're getting, but feel free to reach out to us. Here's our support message, that kind of thing. Let us know if you're running into any issues or you need some help with this. So great way to personalize that experience as opposed to these automated messages just being something that people send straight to the trash bin. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So are these the things that are on by default when they do installation of WordPress?
These are all of the various emails that can be sent out. I will say on some of the servers I've set up, and I'm a little inconsistent on this, but a lot of times I remove some of these so that your server isn't spamming your users. Because as you can see, there's a lot of stuff that can happen there. And if you have 600 some installs and then WordPress issues out an update, you're sending hundreds of emails at a time.
Yeah.
And so,
I got a lot of
exactly. And that's perfectly valid. And so that's the sort of the flip side of things is how many do you send out? You obviously want the install complete, but maybe not all of the various update available. I usually turn that one off. Like, hey, you've got a plugin that could use an update. Well, if you've got a lot of plugins, you could be getting a whole lot of emails. So that's a big one. Or when the update is completed, if there wasn't an error, I'm not sure people need an email, but it's a balance there because some people might go, my install upgraded and I had no idea. Well, you know, in order to keep that on, everybody who gets updates is going to get emails as well. So there is a balance there.
I actually have all, when I work with the users,
Yep.
when they're installing it, they can turn a lot of things off.
They can. So from here, this is the first thing it looks at. If you uncheck it here, it's never even going to show up as an option for the user. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. So unfortunately, yeah, if you uncheck it here, they're not going to be able to turn that back on for themselves. It's removing that capability for them. The end user does have the ability to customize their emails. Almost no one will do that. You know, it's one of those things where they're installing WordPress, they're just hitting next, 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 as opposed to, yes, I want to customize these advanced settings of my application before I go. So, but yeah. And you can also choose where the email is coming from. So, you know, you could put in your support address or something like that. Yes. That's probably what I did. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of times when I'm setting up servers, I'll try to manage some of that for you by making sure that your system isn't spamming your users with stuff. But I am a little bit inconsistent when setting up servers on some of that. I definitely try to leave the error messages on because you want someone to know if something is messed up, right? But you don't necessarily want them to get an email if a plugin update is available but hasn't been installed yet. That's a little bit, you know, there's different ends to that spectrum, and you want to find some sort of happy medium there.
Have those available as options, but not default checked for the user.
I have not found a way to do that, unfortunately. Yeah, yeah, I would love that. Yeah, so that you could turn off most of them and then say, hey, if you need those emails, here's how to turn them on. I haven't found the way to do that. Jumping around a bit, but there's other different things in here I want to look at. Access control. Normally that sounds like a dirty word. I hear a lot of sentiment in the audience of, yeah, we're dealing now with these folks trying to turn stuff off and not wanting access to this and that. But there's valid reasons where maybe you don't want access to everything that Installatron has. Access control lets you turn, and not updating. Let me come back to it. I know, I need a touchpad's messing me up here. So access control lets you turn off specific applications so that they're not available to install. So a good example of this would be, you'll notice obviously Installatron has a lot of stuff in there. Not all of it's been updated very well. You know, there's some software that you can doubt people will need. There's a whole section on e-commerce stuff that allows people to run their own shopping carts from your server. Now, I've had some schools that are like, absolutely freaking not, you know, which is an understandable sentiment. I've had others who are like, we've got a whole entrepreneurship program in our business department, and we would love for them to be able to set up startups, you know, and be able to run those from our domain system. And so, you know, it's totally up to you. If you uncheck one of these, they just don't even show up in Installatron. So when they're going to install an application, it's just not going to be there. Again, different varying levels of extremes. I've had some people, I've got one server where WordPress is it. When they go to Installatron, there's one icon, WordPress. And then I've got a lot of others who just leave everything on and leave it up to the end user to decide what kind of software they might want to run. You're still going to be able to see all the installs and see what's getting installed. But you can customize some of this. Maybe you want to pare it down, especially if you're in a pilot phase. It can be overwhelming to see 180 different types of things that you could run and not knowing, all right, I wanted to set up a website. Am I just going with WordPress? Okay, well, WordPress, let's do that. You know, so it can be overwhelming for sure, but you can choose which ones you want on and which ones you don't. There are ways to set up groups in Installatron. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but I will cover it because I think it's important, where you might have power users that you say, these specific sets of faculty, like, or maybe students, whatever it might be, I've got 5 to 10 people that I trust to do whatever the hell they want. They're awesome. They do great stuff. I can always count on them to be the people that are going to really push the system. And they might break things, but they'll also find out cool stuff in the process. I want them to have access to everything. I want the other 250 users in my system to get my pared down, you know, like what I've customized. And there's ways to do that in here. If I scroll all the way to the top, you'll notice on every page, Installatron mentions this group up here, and it's default. The settings that I'm changing are for everyone. It's global. If I uncheck things, if I turn off applications, if I change these email templates, it's all happening for everyone. But you'll notice over here under groups, I can create new groups. Now we have to tell Installatron who that group is. All right, I know I'm not going crazy here. I think I need to be taught how to use a touchpad. There we go. I don't, no, your touchpad's fine. It's cool. So I'm going to create a new group. You give it a title. Owner would be root. You just leave that the same. And then you choose who the members are. And there's two different ways that you can tell Installatron which people should have it. One is you could put a list of cPanel usernames. So keep in mind, like your server, at this point, we don't really know email addresses and stuff like that. Cpanel username is really going to be the lingo that WHM uses for a lot of stuff. That's how it knows an account. So you might find those individual users' cPanel usernames, pop them in there and say, these are my power users. And then everybody else gets something, you know, more stripped down by default. The other thing you can use is packages, and we'll look at that in WHM in a minute. Packages are these hosting plans. By default, we only set up one for you all. It has a certain amount of disk space that you can customize, and you choose what are all of my users going to get. But you can definitely, and I encourage this, if you like the idea of having power users, having a package that maybe gives them more space. We did it at Mary Washington. We had students and I don't know why we always like downgrade students or whatever, you know, it's kind of weird, but yeah, students got 500 megs. I think faculty got 5 gigs. It was totally imbalanced. Yeah, but you can also imagine students may be setting up one site, 2 sites, whereas a faculty member might be setting up a site each time they run a course. And depending on their workload, they could have 8 or 9 different installs in their system. So it may be likely that they need more disk space. It can be faster rather than one-off, okay, I'll give you more space here, I'll give you more space there, to just go in and say, this person's a faculty, they're gonna get this package, and then they'll automatically have access to more stuff or something like that. So you could set up a power user hosting plan. And then, so all that to say, you would put the name of the individual hosting plan in here, and anybody who's running that plan would then get those settings. So and then throughout Installatron, as you're changing those settings, you would just change the group that you're in depending on which settings you wanted to change. So that dropdown will exist everywhere. I mentioned it back under access control in the top right. It shows up under emails in the top right. It's just which group you're changing those settings for.
You got fun names for it, like
Technorati, yeah.
Is there a way the group, like it just pull from a single sign-on?
Not currently, because your single sign-on is only talking to our WordPress wrapper site right now. Cpanel doesn't know how to deal with shibboleth and other single sign-on methods at all. And so it can't communicate back and forth with it to make settings changes. So right now, our single sign-on only handles the authentication piece. And then there are some ways that we can take shibboleth information to say, like, if someone's a faculty in WordPress, change their role to this. We've done it specifically to allow certain groups to be able to sign up or not automatically. So we can automate that portion of it, but we haven't gone as far as to say, if this person signs up and they're a faculty member, also give them this hosting plan, which has these settings and that kind of stuff there. I think there are definitely some possibilities that we could work through with if that's something that you're interested in. It would probably just involve making sure that certain people are getting the right packages and that kind of stuff. And then everything's based on what hosting plan they have. Backups. Installatron takes a lot of backups. Backups are great. We also take our own backups. We do a lot of backing up, which is a good thing because you want to have those backups. All of our backups are done offsite on a separate server. They don't contribute to your disk quota at all. They're stored for 30 days automatically. All files, all databases, we can get anything back for you within the last 30 days. And that's happening automatically. No one's having to press any buttons, and we just have all of that. So that's great. Installatron does backups anytime that it makes an update to that software. So WordPress comes out with a new version, the first thing it's going to do is take a backup, and then it's going to update the site. Makes it really easy to roll back to a previous version if something broke for whatever reason. Plugin updates, it's going to take a backup. So now you're running 15, 20 plugins. All those plugins are getting updates, backup, backup, backup. all of those Installatron backups are stored within the user's home folder. They're contributing to their disk space. So very quickly, you could say, oh, nobody's going to use a gig of space. Like if they got a WordPress site, it's 70 megs or something, they're fine. But these backups can contribute greatly to their disk space. So there's a couple of things. Obviously, you can increase an individual's quota. I can show you how to do that. But I like this option too. You can set a quota for the amount of backups that an account creates. This will help your users as a whole, just because, you know, then they don't have to manage it themselves. You can say, just delete the oldest backup if they have more than, let's say 5 backups. And then you can say 5 backups per application, per domain, per account. Maybe we just want to do it as a whole. Every account can have up to 5 backups. And we can just say if they're stored locally on the server. And the reason for that, local versus external, is that if they're a power user or they're just the kind of person that knows these settings, Installatron will let you back up to Dropbox, to Google Drive, to a couple different other places. If they put in those settings, you don't really care. Back up till your heart's content because it's not being stored on our server. But if it's a local backup, let's say 5 backups per account, and then just it'll rotate through. So it'll delete the oldest one when a new one gets created. So you can set up a rule like this, and then it applies to the whole server. And that way you don't run into a lot of users who are like, I'm out of space. And you look, it's like, it's probably backups. Yeah, it's backups. So.
In WH, it says per domain. Is it top level domain, or is it like WHM?
That is a great question. And it's totally going to be a guess until I look at the documentation on it. But I'm going to guess that per domain is going to be based on top level domains. So I think in Cpanel, it's possible for you to have timowens.com or timowens.stateu.org, but then to also buy a domain from Namecheap and add it into your Cpanel account and run a project off of that. And so when it says domain here, I'm guessing it's thinking of individual domains.
Just as a data point here in terms of backups, we had one user who had a WordPress icon that was like 100 megabytes and had installed a plugin that would keep backups in the WordPress. The WordPress plugin that was keeping track of backups, that was keeping track of 5 backups. So now the WordPress site was 500 megabytes.
And Installatron's backing them up. Yep.
And then 5 backups of that. So
little recursion.
Had 1 backup 5 times, had 5 backups 5 times.
Yeah.
This grows very quickly.
It does. And it seems counterintuitive to say you don't need to run backup plugins, but you don't need to run backup plugins. Like there's a lot of automated systems already helping people out to where, yeah, they can actually do more harm by adding Updraft or one of these other WordPress plugins that do a great job of backing up. But then their default settings are, yeah, like 30 days or something. Every night it's storing the backups. And yeah, it can quickly grow out of hand. So.
I have another question about backup.
Yeah.
So from a couple of power users, they have deleted all the backup and only have the 500 megabyte.
Yep.
But when they try to install another application like backup, since you are went over your Quota piece or something.
Cpanel. There's not. Cpanel is really ridiculous about it in that they can't read disk space for their statistics on the fly. That gets updated like every 5, 10, 15 minutes, somewhere around that time frame. So if you immediately delete a whole lot of stuff, the statistics don't update. So you'll actually see in the sidebar, it still says you're over quota, but you're not technically. It just needs time to go churn back through and go, okay, yeah, things have cleared up a little bit more now. So just wait, yeah, just usually 15, 20 minutes and you're fine. I know. Yeah, exactly. You can increase a quota and be like, you're good to go, and it's not quite taking for a couple minutes or something. It's just Cpanel's lag.
Can you show,
Sure.
show us where to find what the quota is for the new sites that are created?
Absolutely.
Is that in WHMCS or here?
It's in here, yeah. So, no, absolutely, because we mentioned packages and setting up multiple packages. So let's look at it, because that's the term in WHM is packages, and those are these different hosting plans. So again, you'll see me use the search a lot here. I'm going to start typing package, it fills out, and you can see where you can add new ones, delete them, edit an existing one. So I'm actually going to edit the one that's already on here. This system has a few in here. You can see I like to set up sort of this like masterclass unlimited package, and nobody gets that but me, right? But it's like you can do anything, right? There's no limitations, no quota whatsoever. If I wanted to use every bit on the server, every byte, I could do it. But then there's defaults on stateu.org. The default package when people are signing up in WHMCS is WordPress in the classroom. Yours will be called like default, something along those lines. So I'm going to edit this one just so you can see the settings.
What does it mean when there's a default with a capital D and a default with a small d?
We just ran into this with Brimar actually as well. It means confusion is what it means. Yeah, usually capital D is going to be the correct one. WHM, when you first install it, it needs some kind of package in there. So the lowercase default exists in there, but it's not used by us. So I don't think you can delete it. That's the problem. Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of a default on the server, but our default we had to name differently. We probably have a different name like basic or I don't know what you would, maybe that's a bad term, but yeah, so you see if I'm editing a package in here, I get to choose how much resources a person can have. So disk quota is up here. It's measured in megabytes. So if I was giving a gig of space, this is where it gets kind of mathematical, but it's 1,024 megabytes. So you could just do 1,000, it's fine. But yeah, this is measured in megabytes, so I can choose a certain amount. Unlimited doesn't mean it's your server does have a limit, right? So even when they say unlimited, there's, they could potentially take up all the space on your server, and that's, whatever your server has, depending on our contracts with you all. But you do want to set some kind of quota, mostly because of that backup issue. Or just, I've had people where their site had an error, and it writes to a file, and it's writing it every second. Bam, 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 keeps writing to a file. After a day or two, that text file gets larger and larger. And then after a month and 3 months, like suddenly their site's taking up 40 gigs of space and it's an error log. It's one file on the system. If they have a disk quota, things stop. Like, it can stop that so you don't wake up one day and nobody has any disk space because there was an error on one site that filled up the entire account. So I don't recommend unlimited for most anyone, even your power users. You should be able to set a fairly high limit for power users, but not really allow them to take up 100% of your whole server space. The other stuff you won't run into too much, it mentions email databases. Maybe you don't want to have people dealing with email at all. So you could just say, no, you can't create email addresses and that kind of stuff. There's limitations set by default on how much email can go out from a user. It's good to prevent spammers. And I don't mean that in a malicious way like your community would spam out, but if their WordPress site gets hacked, that WordPress install is going to start sending out emails, and you don't want your server to end up on blacklist. So typically our default here is going to be 25. That's what you'll see on a lot of servers. 25 to 50 is usually a safe range for normal activity. Again, you may have a power user who's like, I've got a newsletter with 10,000 people. And it's like, okay, let's talk about MailChimp or other third-party services as opposed to using our server to send spam. Like, it's not spam. It's like it's 10,000 users getting emails from you. So, but yeah, so you can customize a package in here. And so you might raise the limits for a power user group and lower them down for a default group. Disk usage would be the biggest thing in there.
Shell access too, right?
Shell, yeah. Shell is for SSH. All accounts have access to FTP. You saw up there, actually, that it says FTP accounts. Those are additional ones that they can create. Additional FTP accounts in Cpanel are like, I need to create an FTP account that has access to this one folder so that people can upload it and work with it. But Cpanel, when you first create it, you got the email with the username and password. That's a FTP account that has access to everything. Shell would be referring to SSH, secure shell access, and it's logging in by terminal to do other commands.
Max database, that's in addition to the ones that the application itself.
If I have one Max database and I install WordPress, Installatron's going to throw an error if I try to install anything else. Yeah.
So you wouldn't set that. I mean, you haven't set this.
Max databases is on 6 on this server. On most of ours, there's a lot more unlimited. This is because StateU is a trial server. We limit how much just random people can sign up for an account and start using the resources on there because we've had issues with folks using it for less than gracious purposes. Yeah. Right.
This space will probably be a number.
Yeah.
And everything else will be unlimited. Then emails will be unlimited.
Yeah.
25.
Yeah. It's also a good place to mention because it shows up under packages, this feature manager here. It's right underneath of edit a package when I'm searching here. Feature manager allows you to just turn off features in cPanel. So if I set 0 email, let's say I don't want people to deal with email. If I set 0 email addresses, they can still see the email interface and they go to create one and then they get an error message saying you're not allowed. Not the best experience in my opinion. So you're gonna edit this default feature list here and it's very straightforward. There's checkboxes. So, and you can search. So let's say I'm searching email and I get a bunch of stuff in here. And you have to play around with naming on stuff. So sometimes you just have to scroll through and try checking and unchecking things and then look over on cPanel to see if it shows up or not. But if I uncheck like email accounts in here and then I go to cPanel, that icon is no longer there. Nobody has access to it. They don't have the ability to install it. They can't guess at what the URL might be. It's disabled for all users. So if there's something that, you know, I would do that less in the packages. Packages are great for disk quota, but if you just want to turn off the ability for people to access email or to do that kind of thing or whatever it might be, yeah. Cpanel has a lot of icons, and you might decide, yeah, just to start, we're going to pare things down a little bit. You know, applications, subdomains, you know, databases, and that's it. You know, or files, and leave out some of the more advanced features that Cpanel has. So, yeah.
That does go back to what Tim was talking about, the packages. So you
Yeah.
could have a package that is very basic, applications, file management. One that's, you know, email, file management, DNS, everything.
Yeah.
You can build that experience through the feature manager.
So I'm back to editing that package. I can choose which feature list that package gets. So power users get access to everything. My default package is going to access my restricted list, which is a smaller set of icons and that kind of stuff. It's a very popular thing to do. So that.
Again, if people do want to do this and want to play with this, come to us and say, look, I'm really interested in how to do this.
Mhm. Absolutely.
I have one question about the edit. Maximum ads on domain,
Yes.
mine says 0. Does that mean that people cannot bring their own?
Cpanel's default on those is 0. I don't know if, let me see which package you're on if you scroll up. But it's the lowercase default. Is there an uppercase one?
No.
There's not? Okay. So you could edit if you want. Add-on domains in cPanel mean buy a domain, add it into your account for hosting. So if you want people to be able to do that, you would change that to unlimited probably would be the right answer there. So yeah, in most cases, and that may have just been an oversight when setting up your server, in most cases, we leave most things unlimited with the exception of disk quota and the emails per hour.
Questions there. One of the things we will go into this afternoon, and Lauren, in case you supported the minute, we'll look at how you change quota on a case-by-case basis. So for one faculty member, how you would change a domain on a case-by-case basis. So that stuff will still be covered. But back to you, Tim, just questions about WHM. We're not done. We will return again in the second half of the day. You think it's a great overview in terms of how you customize and feature WHM.
Yeah, and we may after lunch, I'll tackle a little bit more on getting some statistics and insight into the system so that we get there. It is noon, so we'll break this up a little bit because we had originally scheduled the WHM stuff to happen after lunch. So we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but we do have a lot of stuff after lunch as well. But I want to give people a little bit of a break here. So we've got your Chipotle orders. Everything's in the back. Lauren ducked out for a second, but I'll go ahead and explain it because I built it. So we got two things going on at lunchtime here. You can totally eat, but I built an escape room in our office. And so you're going to be broken up into two groups, and one will probably get to do it today and one will get to do it tomorrow. Has anyone ever done a breakout room before? A few people have kind of, this is a new thing, and it's a very cool thing, I think. I'm really kind of addicted to them. As you can tell, I suddenly light up like, all right, enough WHM, let's talk about the escape room. But the idea is that we've got a storyline and you're going to be put into a room and you've got to solve puzzles and clues to get out. It has nothing to do with technology. It's just for fun. It's just to get to know the people around you and to just have a little bit of fun. So, you know, after eating lunch or during lunch or before you eat lunch, we can try that out. You have a max time of 1 hour, but I've seen people get out in 25 minutes. So far as we've been testing it out, it's been the fastest time, but we've never tested it with the kind of folks that we have here. So I have big hopes here. So
what kind of focus?
yeah. So we'll have to figure out the groups. Maybe we can just, you know, keep it laissez-faire and just like, you know, figure out who wants to do that or whatever. But first we'll grab our food and give people a chance to eat and that kind of thing. And then we'll take a group into there maybe.
And we do need to actually, the group that goes today is sign an NDA.
That's true. Yeah. Well, because it's the easiest way to do that is to say it's a competition. So you don't want to be giving clues to the group that goes later than you. Yeah, can't get out, start eating, and yeah, I won't actually lock the door. But yeah. So where did Lauren go? We need 5 minutes. Oh.
Does anyone have any questions?
I have one WHM question.
Yeah.
So I've created packages, so I have one for faculty and students because faculty are more important. Like they set up a class with a method study and they set up. They have
different needs. Yeah, no, totally.
But that's really a one by one, right? There's no way in the sign up process, like when I block them from subscriber to author, there's not really a place there to choose the package. Right?
That's right.
I have to go in afterwards and say this is a faculty member.
Right now, the way the Domain One Zone system works is there's a default package that default package that everyone gets, and then you can do multiples, but you are having to do it after the fact. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in WHM, there's a way to modify multiple accounts. So if you are thinking like, okay, now that I added power users, I know 10 people that I want to do, you can do that in there. If you search multiple, you can change multiple accounts in there to give them a new package.
Question about the information you have to write.
Yeah.
I often have this, you must reboot the server.
Yeah.
Me too.
Right.
Am I supposed to be doing something?
No, because what happens is we reboot at times where we tell you ahead of time and it's off schedule and it's not during the day and that kind of stuff. So yeah, leave the updates to us. Usually what we do is we set up scheduled times and coordinate with you all and say, hey, do you have a break coming up? We've got some updates to run and that kind of stuff, and choose those. Cpanel runs updates of their own that get applied automatically. And so those are happening anyway. Packages are getting updated, security updates are getting applied to the software that Cpanel is running. That message implies that something was updated that needs a reboot. That's usually a kernel update, to get really technical on you. But yeah, a server kernel does require a reboot in order for that kernel to take effect and for those settings to apply. But because it requires downtime, we will work with you directly and worry on those. So otherwise, Cpanel is getting all the updates automatically for things like new versions of PHPMyAdmin or just fixes and security updates that they're doing within their system.
So if we see that, contact you and set up that, or you do.
If you want, usually like our method is that we'll contact you before a break is coming up. We shoot for generally around the semester or whatever. But sometimes if it's a really important one, we'll say like, hey, do you have like a fall break or a winter break coming up here, or even like a long weekend where, you know, luckily with Jim living in Italy, while we don't have 24/7 access, we can schedule things where it's like, you know, 2, 3 a.m., you know, most of your users' times, to where, you know, we do a quick reboot and it's down for 5 minutes, and then you've got those.
I don't think we've actually gotten there yet, but maybe we can talk about it at a later point. When I logged into Cpanel, the first thing I did when I logged into my own account in Cpanel is I went, okay, well, I'm always going to be wanting applications, and that is like, you know, 3/4 of the way down the page or something. So the applications panel, I moved that up and I got it in, because I do that.
Yeah.
Twice a time. Could we do that for as the default kind of Cpanel setup that our users will see?
Yes. Yeah. You'll want us to help you with it because the way Cpanel does it is goofy. Yeah. The nerd speak there is that it's a JSON file that lives on the server and has a whole bunch of technical garbage in it that controls what the order is of stuff. Typically, our default is for applications to be the first item on there. So if that's not happening, but just in general, you might say, what are all the stuff? What order do we want? Put in a ticket. We'll take care of it for you. Make sure that that order happens for users. Yeah. Now, once somebody has changed it, it registers that as a user profile change. And so it's not going to go back and change that back for other users, but that just becomes the default until someone has made a change, sort of like customizing it for their own. All right.
Before we do break down, do we want to decide on what's group 1 versus group 2? Or to break that one, or do we want to do that later? It might be hard once everybody does it.
Maybe just to make it easy, we'll just do it by tables. Maybe like have all 6 here, and then the all 8 here be team 1 and team 2. Does that work? Yeah. Let's do it that way.
So which team wants?
That's a good question. Nobody's going to volunteer. Yeah. Cool.
You want to go today?
Well, then there you go.
Today.
Team 2.